Hello, guten Tag und grüß Gott. Today is Sunday, May the 22nd, 2022. And it's another fine day in Southern California with the sun shining out there, in the 70s. A wonderful day. I hope there's some sunshine in the Ukraine these days. And from time to time, there's got to be. But I want to tell you that the news of the last week is pretty much the same as it's been the week before. The Russians keep bombarding, and the Ukrainians suffer. That's pretty much what you see in the news these days, and that's what you hear in the television these days, and that's what's going on. So I'm going to pick out a few things because I do want to go through the Wall Street Journal, and then I'll pick up toward the end a part of my spiritual journey. I think this may be part 3, maybe part 4. I'm not too sure. I actually have to look. So, let's look at what's going on in the world these days. Well, what's interesting is I read an article about the Northern Ireland Protocol. And so as you, when you look back at this time here, you will notice that Britain has exited the EU, and that's kind of problematic for Ireland because Ireland is still part of the EU with the exception of Northern Ireland. And so trade has become difficult. But before the Brexit, when Britain left the EU, Boris Johnson negotiated something they called the Northern Ireland Protocol. In other words, kind of keep trade the same. You don't want to screw things up economically and so forth. But that's becoming more difficult because Ireland, is insisting on EU rules. EU likes to legislate the curvature of bananas and things like this, and England doesn't really want to do that anymore. They like to have their own thing, and they don't want to be ruled by Brussels, so to speak. Well, this whole thing with the EU, from my perspective, has just been a little bit of a fiasco because, I think Europe was trying to pattern itself after the United States, where you have one big federation, the US of A, and this would be the European Union. And then everybody has a state and they have statehood and so forth. And while there's a reasonable amount of autonomy here and there between the states, I've become aware of some really ridiculous things, that are being legislated from Brussels. Well, first of all, you have to take immigrants. Well, what the hell? Not every state wants to take immigrants from the Middle East, especially with another religion like, Muslims. So now they have to accommodate these things, and it's a huge economic burden on the people there. On the other hand, you have to feel for the people that are leaving their countries because of, strife. And the people that are coming, it's probably not their fault, But among them are not just, the downtrodden and so forth, the families and so on. There are a lot of young people that have not joined the military that have become immigrants, but I don't really have to rehash this because all of those stories of immigration and so forth are really overtaken by what's going on in the Ukraine right now. And what's going on in the Ukraine is really, really quite awful. There are 10 million of the 40-some million Ukrainians have already lost their home. But on the other hand, there's some of them actually moving back from Poland and getting back into some of their homeland. And so you read stories, when they come home, the places are destroyed. and they're trying to make a life as good as they can. And then you see videos, that people post on the internet, Ukrainians driving among the rubble in their bicycles or maybe in a car or something, trying to achieve some sort of normalcy. And it's really hard to do. And I do understand that that's really hard to do, but you simply cannot ignore the war, the devastation. So what's happened so far is that just very recently, the Russians have claimed, taken the city of Mariupol, which is right there, a port in the Black Sea, and it was an important port for the Ukraine because they got a lot of their supplies and so forth, and the trade came through there, and also Odessa, So, but anyway, so now the Russians are in charge of Mariupol because the holdouts in the steel mill of Mariupol, I think they've been told to surrender, and so they're now, I don't know, a few hundred people that are now, maybe around 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers that are now in captivity of the Russians. And of course, everybody's wondering, how are the Russians going to treat them? Prisoners of war are supposed to be treated humanely, at least. So I'm sure they're going to have stories to tell, and I'm sure that the Russians have taken away their cell phones, so there won't be any TikTok videos, from these guys. And I kind of feel bad when I talk about the suffering, that's going on in Russia and the Ukraine right now, with a smile on my face. It makes me feel a little bit disingenuous on this, but war really is a bitch. So, yeah, the Ukrainians are claiming small victories, and the Russians basically are bombarding everything to rubble. In fact, Zelensky went on TV and said, the Donbas area basically is a pile of rubble. So this is what the Russians are occupying right now, a pile of rubble. So I don't know, whatever the reasons are. And just recently somebody asked me, we were talking about Ukraine and the war, just bringing up the subject. And the person said, why? Okay. And so that's a simple word, but the meaning behind it is gargantuan, basically, because, nobody really knows why. And there are probably hundreds of explanations that are going around. Putin says, well, you guys threatened me. The Americans say, hell no, we didn't. We just want to promote democracy. And Putin, you're a bad guy, you're a dictator. And Putin says, oh, I love Trump. And of course, that sends everybody in America into some sort of apoplectic shock, because what Russia has done is, we've basically have, declared persona non grata and trying to take people's properties away that are Russians, the oligarchs and so forth. So the Russians are now retaliating and say, you guys, Biden and Pelosi and so forth, you're also not welcome in the world that we control, but they didn't ban Trump, so Jesus. Okay, so so I'm sure the Democrats are going to come out again. Oh my God, there is more collusion, between Trump and the Russians. Shit, a bunch of crap, Anyway, I think Trump was really trying to get along with Putin and trying to figure out, how we're going to avoid World War III, because, that is still a possibility. We don't really know what will happen in terms of the use of nuclear weapons. And what if there are weapons that are, like what they call tactical nuclear weapons? So, instead of sending missiles, or 1,000 missiles into Kirkuk or something like that, a city, Ukrainians, and destroying all of that city, or Mariupol for that matter, because that's a pile of rubble now. If there are tactical nuclear weapons, you could just send one missile and just kind of level the entire city, just as one. Okay, so if that happens, what will be our response? Because the Ukrainians gave up all their nukes. It's only the Russians that have them. And the Ukrainians basically have Chernobyl, a nuclear power plant. I don't know, they may have some other things. But it's just an awful situation. So what's happening in the market, of course, the market news is Dow Jones is down the tubes. The S&P 500 is at the lowest point since, or has lost more in 1 week, than it did in 2008. And they're now saying, well, it dipped into bear territory. And I'm not sure exactly what that definition is of bear territory, but it evidently swung out a little bit. So my expectation is that next week the market is still going to be shit and so forth. So economically, the post-pandemic recovery, if we are in a post-pandemic, but maybe I'm a little bit too early with this particular assessment, is really painful. So the market sucks. Supply lines have been disrupted and destroyed. Somebody just recently told me that Sri Lanka is at the brink of starvation because the country ran out of money. And oddly enough, there are container ships just sitting in the harbor there that could be unloaded with who knows what will save these people. But they don't have access to it because these guys are not going to unload anything without getting paid for, So it's getting ugly around the world. And the conclusion that I have drawn from this entire lockdown pandemic and all that stuff, that China has hoisted upon us and the world, by the way. And yes, it was China, that did this, and no matter what their excuses are, it came from China. This will take us years to recover because the disruption, that we have felt, even from a lockdown. Now, we were on a lockdown, approximately a total lockdown, safer at home, don't go outside, don't buy anything, just stay in, for about, I think a month or maybe a little bit more. And then, phases of this lockdown continued all the way through 2020 and I think even early 2021. But what has happened is that the impact on how commerce is being done, is immense. And we don't even have a clue yet as to what's really going to happen. But inflation is rampant, and I've talked about that before, and by rampant I mean it. We have double digits inflation, and the Fed has raised the CPI, the consumer index. I don't know, the words kind of elude me right now, but anyway, they keep inching it up, trying to get to a point where, the economy will stabilize. But the supply line disruption is immense, and we haven't even figured out how yet. For instance, let me just give you an example. I think the poverty line for annual income is somewhat under $50,000, or maybe it's $24,000. I'm not sure, but it's definitely under $50,000. So truck drivers, just to haul stuff around, they're being offered $100,000 a year jobs. Okay, great. And Walmart can't even find managers, store managers. They're offering $200,000 a year. Now this is absolutely insane. Things are really, upside down and backwards right now. So it'll take us a while to recover. And I think 2022 will just be another one of those years where we're trying to find a new footing in the economy. Anyway, baby formula. That's a big deal right now. Baby formula is not everywhere available, and I didn't realize that was such a big deal because when I grew up, I don't think there was any baby formula. Maybe there was in Europe, but if a child couldn't be nursed on mom's breast, then they gave, I remember my mom had whole milk, and then you hoped as quick as possible that the kid would actually start to feed something, where you could mash something up, that is real food and give it to him and so forth. So baby formula, I don't think it was available. I don't remember anything. I don't know whether anybody would have had any money to buy baby formula. I had to go for milk, and I don't know how my mom made it through, but I know that she kept my brother Walter on the breast until he was about, I think, 4 or 5 years old, because she was keenly aware of the importance of nutrition in early life. And I was talking just recently to somebody, I remember getting my daily spoon of cod liver oil. God, did I hate that, And we did have something called Ovaltine, so that had vitamins and things. But that was later on, immediately after the war, until about 1950 or 1949 or so. Things were really shit, there were always problems with food, and we were just struggling to get by. So let me just quickly go through the Wall Street Journal and see whether there's anything that I really want to talk about. Elon Musk, I said that the Twitter deal is on hold, and I guess it's still on hold. So I'm not sure where that's going because, he evidently wanted to buy Twitter, for $44 billion, and he lined up all of the finances and everything. And now he's saying, that, Twitter didn't do all of their due diligence because he has no idea, how many real subscribers there are in Twitter and how many are bots, what is that percentage? And I didn't really know that was an issue, but evidently there are a lot of AI that are pretending to be people and subscribers and so forth. And as I talked about before, that some of the games are played by opponents that are AI, and people really think that they're people, so wow. Well, here, and let's see, this is, that was from last Saturday, Sunday, the Wall Street Journal. Putin drives Finland into NATO's arms. Yeah, that's very, very, very true because Sweden and Finland, have applied for NATO membership because, of course, they're now concerned, if, in the 21st century, here we are, invading another civilized country for the hell of it because we think maybe we're threatened or something, and, whatever Putin's reasoning was, that can now happen to anybody if you think about it, So, Sweden basically, the Baltic Sea is the border to Russia, and so is Finland actually has a land border to Russia. And they've been trying to kind of stay neutral like Switzerland, like, hey, you know what? I know you guys are adversaries, West and East, Russia, and, but, I mean, hey, you guys have McDonald's and so forth, but you don't want NATO right next to you? Okay, we won't be NATO right next to you. But now, it's a whole different thing. And of course, what Putin did, he's cut off the gas to Finland. I don't know what they'll do with that right now, but I mean, there's springtime for Finland, right? We're heading towards summer. Maybe things are getting better and they can survive that, and they don't give a shit about the Russian gas. I don't know. We had a badass killing, in Buffalo, um, New York, and some guy, went in with a AK, well, some sort of an assault rifle, or what they call an assault rifle, and shot up a market that he knew was populated by black people primarily, and so he was actually out to shoot black people. Now, so the press, of course, calls him, and Biden said, white supremacy is a poison to the people. Yeah, of course, when you are shooting up people, this guy is a nutcase, to go in and just start killing people, whether it's blacks or whites. And then we've also had blacks, killing white people or people right around them. Like the subway killer, was black. And there's some guy in Texas, that went to a high school, and shot a bunch of kids, and he's out on bail, and he's black, So I don't know whether whether we should make a big deal of the race on this particular thing, because, this guy clearly was a nutcase, and it's going to hurt everybody. And tragically, about 10 people lost their lives, and that's always a bad deal, So, but, he didn't kill himself, so at least he gets to stand trial for his offenses. But my guess is if he ever gets out into the the regular prison population, that'll be the end of him. That's for sure. So McDonald's pulls out of Russia over the Ukraine war, and so some oligarch is probably getting a really nice deal, buying a bunch of McDonald's stores. And I don't know what Subway is going to do, probably something very similar. So Biden did call racism a poison. Yeah, and that's very true. Racism is a poison. We ought to celebrate, the differences of races and their contributions to it, instead, being hateful. But here's the thing, with this guy, so it stops at, his, the narrative stops at the point where he is called a white supremacist, okay? But, we need to do a little bit of a deeper dig in this particular issue, because what caused the white supremacy? It wasn't just because he was white. There were things going on that caused him to become that. I mean, yeah, his mental instability, was certainly a contributing factor, but, what caused that? What in his environment actually caused that white supremacy, that he decided that he had to take such drastic action of killing a bunch of people and making a statement like that, which is just horrific. Another interesting thing came about in the news is that there was a plane crash in China that was totally unexplained. And, I've seen the crash site, pictures of the crash site, and there doesn't seem to be much left. I mean, it's a big crater, where this passenger jet, a Boeing 737, just crashed. So the black box has finally given up its data, and Boeing says that it indicates that it was a deliberate nosedive. So somebody in the cockpit wanted to commit suicide, and they did so by nosediving that plane straight into the ground. And there are videos, that show that plane going straight down. Anyway. So the recession fears drive down stocks, absolutely. So recession fears. But it isn't just that. For instance, Target, Home Depot, Dollar General, Walmart, they're all showing lower profits. And why? Because their costs, of goods are higher, and they're reluctant to raise the prices. And so they're taking it out of their own profit, hoping to sometime in the future to make up again. But they don't want to lose customers just by increasing prices. So yes, a recession may well be on the horizon. So on Friday, the slump, which is our economic situation right now, sends the S&P 500 near bear territory, and I talked about that. And then here's the news from Ukraine, okay? And this is kind of a cool picture because I want to show you this. The Ukrainians, how they deal with their tanks. It's kind of a cool picture. There you can see it, really hidden, really hidden. Okay. So the Ukrainian intelligence chief says that the Russian forces will be expelled, not only from the Donbass and not Mariupol, so forth, but they want to throw them out of the Ukraine too. So this is the guy that is in charge of Ukraine intelligence, and he says that. Well, this is a little bit interesting, different, and interestingly different from World War II. I kept thinking, that the Russians are these tenacious people, that just don't give up, okay? They're going to keep rolling like a steamroller and just going to keep coming. And you can kill thousands, you can kill a million, but they're going to keep coming because they're going to recruit more people and so forth. And some of that is already happening because they're putting out feelers now for 40-year-olds, to join the fray in Ukraine. And so maybe they have that same kind of a commitment. But there is a huge difference this time between, 1945 and now, in terms of Russia, is that, in 1945 and a few years before then, which caused the, let's say from Stalingrad on, which caused the Russian advance toward the West, and the defeat of Nazi Germany, was because, they were massively supplied from the United States, with equipment, because, our shipyards kept pulling out stuff, I think there was like one battleship a day, used to come out. So no matter what the German U-boat sank, we always had more, so we meaning the United States. And we just had this fantastic manufacturing capacity, and so we shared it with the Allies, and the Russians, of course, were allies. What is different now is that the Russians are sort of on their own. The Chinese, they're kind of sitting on the sideline. They're not going to supply much for them. Belarus, I don't know to what extent they can do this. And there's some other, Kazakhstan, I think, is also on the Russian side. But anyway, and of course now Georgia, although the Georgians are still pissed off, that Russia just kind of walked in there, so they're not convinced that the Russian occupation is justified, so I don't know to what extent they're fighting back. Maybe they're not. But, the Russians are actually operating without U.S. support. And the U.S. support and manufacturing capability is going to aid the Ukraine. So maybe this guy, this intelligence chief, is right. But I'm not holding out a lot of hope because, the Russians can also crank up their manufacturing capability. I've seen that before. They put tanks together that just barely held up for a bunch of times because they knew that the German Tiger tanks, were far superior, and they would smash the T-34s into smithereens. And so they cut a lot of, they took a lot of shortcuts in order to produce more tanks and so forth. And the Russians are also quite savvy in the drone area and missiles and so forth. And then there's always that nuclear question. So this is a totally different kind of situation. We managed to get out of the or being defeated in Afghanistan, just like the Russians were defeated in Afghanistan without using without using nukes. And I mean, if you think about it, when we went into Kuwait, if we had dropped one nuke, then the war would have been over in one day. Or same thing in Afghanistan. Set off one nuke in the capital, and it's over. It's just kind of like it was in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. But that didn't happen. We decided to tuck in our tail and leave. As a matter of fact, just left Afghanistan to the Taliban. And and of course they're running their country the way they want to, but people can get really upset. How can you just invade a legitimate country and cause that problem with Ukraine? But we have to remember that it was the United States that also invaded legitimate countries, like Iraq and Afghanistan. Of course, we had our reasons. The reasons were the WMDs in Iraq. But I still always remember, that Frenchman that went to the UN and said, we don't have a right to invade Iraq, because the UN wanted to have that resolution. Colin Powell made the case, that they're transporting WMDs, nuclear weapons around, and they're going to use them. And so we have to preemptively take over the rest of Iraq. That was, well, all of Iraq, actually, because they had a no-fly zone and that was violated all the time, and so. Anyway, so yeah, we invaded countries too, Of course, we think we have that higher purpose because, we promote democracy, and the Russians, I don't know, but they think they promote communism or dictatorship or whatever. But we got to stop this shit, altogether. I don't think any country has any right to invade anybody else. And now that we've seen, all the shenanigans that went on about Iraq, that whole WMD thing was a fucking phony. And Colin Powell was thoroughly embarrassed by that, by that misinformation. And I think even George too, Bush, was also embarrassed by that quite a bit. And America was embarrassed by that whole thing, But there are always people saying, yeah, well, they actually had WMDs and they moved them to Syria, and Syria is hiding them, and that's why we had to go there. And, I think the world just got to be tired of this bullshit, of invading other countries, only because we think, that they are up to something. Well, get ready for the up to something, but I'm not so sure that we just ought to walk in, and kill a bunch of people, Anyway, and that's from my soapbox. So yeah, here we go, So I want to shift gears right now because I want to talk about, the progress of my spiritual journey. So last time I talked about my spiritual journey was when my brother Heinz died, and I was convinced that he was going to a better place, and there was something inside of me thinking, why in the hell didn't I get to go? Because life in Switow, Czechoslovakia at the time, was really kind of crappy, and but anyway, he had found a way out of it. And I don't know whether I've mentioned that before, but of course he had all the attention because evidently he must have been sicker than I. So my mom was sitting there with him, and he told her, he said, Mom, don't worry, you'll get another one just like me. So, this kid was a really smart kid, okay? So he was about 3 years old, and he was far more responsible than I was. I was going on 5 or 5. I remember my mom was able to send him to the store to get groceries. She couldn't send me because, I'd probably on the way there play with the money and lose it and go to the grocery store and not know what to get. And maybe that has happened. I'm making this up right now, but maybe that happened. But anyway, Heinz was actually a really smart kid, and my parents told me ad nauseum sometimes, how smart he was and how much smarter he was than I was, and I tell you what, that doesn't hurt my feelings. The guy was really smart. If we had grown up together, I would have been the little brother to him, basically, because he was so far ahead of me. But that wasn't to be. So Mom was convinced that he went to heaven and that he was with the angels. So there were probably a lot of instances before what I'm going to use as another one of those pivotal moments in my spirituality. When we left Czechoslovakia on the train, and we hadn't had anything to eat for a while, that kind of thing, or Schoenstedt, we left, and we had nothing to eat for a couple of weeks, and then somebody handed us some food, and I think I talked about this in another video. My mom said, "Oh, this was an angel. God sent us this person," because she handed it directly to me. And how did she know that we needed it the most? Because we were the ones that hadn't been eating. Now there were people around us that were probably from elsewhere. Who knows what their situation was, but I know we shared the food with them. Anyway, and we were able to eat, so that was a big deal. So in Germany, the church is treated totally different. For instance, there are regions that are Catholic and there are regions that are Protestant. And I think that's pretty much it, because if you're not Catholic, you're lumped in, if you're a Zionist or whatever other thing, you're lumped in with the Protestants. But there is such a thing as church tax. So everybody in Germany is, if you have an income tax, you get taxed, by the church. And that kind of keeps the church going. So if you're in the Protestant area, the tax money goes to the Protestant churches, and I don't know how they divide it up, but that's what keeps them going. And then the Catholics, have their crack at it at the tax, elsewhere. So, but what that also means that in public education you have religious instruction. So in the place that I lived, in Marbach, we had a religious instruction, and it was kind of peculiar because when we had an hour for religion, our local Pfarrer, or the priest or the minister, I guess in Protestants would be minister, priest, and Catholic. He would come into the classroom and lecture on the Bible and Protestant ideology or whatever he needed to say that. Now, before he came in, there were usually a group of 3 or 4 people that left that classroom because they went elsewhere, and they were the Catholics, and they got their separate instruction for an hour there. So Pfarrer Zilke would come in and give us religious instruction. And the reason I kind of remember that as a pivotal moment in my spiritual journey is that, we started in Genesis, and I have a Bible here that I'm going to use, for this particular piece. And And so, Farad Silke told us the story of Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel. Okay? These were the first people in the world. Okay? And so then Cain was jealous of Abel and killed him. And then God would say to him, to Cain, says, and I'm going to read this here, and the Lord said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? So he lied to God, right? But on the other hand, if God spoke to him, he already knew where Abel was, right? And that's kind of shown in there. Now, I was, 5, 6 years old or something like that. I think by then I was 6. And he says, and he said, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood cries out unto me from the ground. Yeah, buried him, bloody. Thou art now cursed on earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. I love the poetry of this, the King James Version is just, really something. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. And Cain said unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Really. Behold, thou hast driven me out of, and then he says why. His punishment was greater than he can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth. That's interesting that he says face of the earth. And from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a fugitive and vagabond in the earth. And it shall come to pass that every one that findeth me shall slay me. So, what kind of went through my mind is, everyone that findeth me shall slay me. And so then the Lord said unto him, obviously the Lord was a little more forgiving here, and he says, therefore, whosoever slays Cain shall be taken unto him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest anyone finding him should kill him. So in other words, Farad Silke explained to us, that the Lord says, okay, you may be suffering and stuff, but, I'm going to put a mark on your head, and if somebody kills you, they'll get killed 7 times over, and they wouldn't want to do that. So you're not going to get killed. And then Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod, on the east of Eden. Okay, so Nod was still kind of, Nod was inside of Eden or to the east of Eden. Now think about this. A little kid goes through this, and I'm going through this right now in greater detail than I would have thought of at that time. But here is what stuck out. And so Cain went away, and he dwelt in the land of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch, and he built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. Okay. That's what did it for me. So if there were these 4 people in the world, Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, what the hell was going on there? Obviously other people. First of all, he was afraid of them, that they might kill him and so forth, because, he did this bad thing. And where the hell did he find his wife? So, anyway, I'm not talking about this particular section, in what was going on through my mind at that time, and of course it's a little amplified with what I'm thinking right now. But I have to say, you know, I was perplexed. So I was perplexed. So not only did God not heed my mother's voice, you know, didn't, I mean, one would have to say that he kept us from harm, great harm, but not from the suffering, because it was a bad, bad time. And, you know, and then there's something lacking in the Bible here, you know, with this explanation that we're supposed to believe. Could anybody explain where in the heck these people come from? Where he found a wife, you know? He found a wife, you know, was she just all there by himself? And so forth. And I know that Genesis is being treated later on a little bit more, you know, because, you know, right after that, you know, they go through the generations of, you know, he who begot, and begot, and everybody begot, you know. And so, you know, they're trying to basically get down and establish a lineage to David, you know. So that's what's going on there. Well, at least till Noah, you know. And they all got really, really quite old, you know, 600 years old. Methuselah like 900 some years old, you know. It must have been some time where the fruits of the earth, you know, really yielded great stuff, you know. So, yeah, I'll leave you with this for now because we're into this for another 45 minutes. Anyway, I bid you farewell. So long, and we must, in fact, the universe with us.